So let's start. So looking at this now, the role of B and T cells in the immunity now. Now, we know what the memory cells are generally for, right? So the memory cells, right, are generally activated, right? So, firstly, what are they for, right? So they keep pieces of antigens, right, for long-term use. So they keep an entire storage, an entire memory bank of all the antigens and all the infections that the body had before, right? And any specific time, right, when the infection is supposed to arise again, there would be a more a faster, right, and a more, what you'd say now, a more efficient release of antibodies or a more immediate release of antibodies, right? So the memory B cells know, right, they will be activated during the primary immune response. So naive B cells are activated by their specific antigens, right, using the help of T cells, right? So when the differentiation occurs, right, they will produce memory cells, right? So their use is for the rapid response, right, upon re-exposure of the same antigen, right? It will increase the affinity of the memory B cells that have basically memory cells have undergo any type of affinity maturation in germinal centers, resulting in antibodies with higher affinity for the antigen. So what are basically gonna be happening now, right? When they produce um these new memory B cells with the antigen, right? They will continue through maturation and produce more effective antibodies for the specific antigen, right? So they will not only release more antigens, but the antigens will not antigens rather more antibodies, right, at a quicker rate, but they will be more effective, right? So that's generally what it's there for. So these B cells would live in the body for years or even decades, providing long-term protection, right? The memory T cells, however, now generally do the same thing, right? After they bind to antigen presenting cells, right, cytotoxin will come out, right? Well, not cytotoxins. Cytokines will be produced, right, and they will cause the T cells to differentiate into cytotoxic T cells, helper T cells, and memory T cells, right? So the memory T cells now, we know what will happen here, right? They generally reside within the we're looking at the different types of memory T cells, right? There are different types. You have the central memory T cell, effector memory T cell, and the tissue resident memory T cell, right? What these generally do is occupy different regions within the body, so they cover generally all their bases. So central memory T cells will exist within the lymph, right, and the lymph nodes, right, the effect and the spleen as well. The effector memory T cells now will circulate in the blood and all peripheral tissues, while the tissue resident T cells will predominantly remain in non-lymphoid tissues. So notice that they basically try to reside over generally the entire body, right? Try to cover all their bases, right? So they try to the central memory T cells will try to proliferate, right, and divide, right, into effector T cells upon re-exposure to the same antigen, right? The effector T cells now will actually provide effector functions, right? Such as cytotoxic activity. So they themselves remember the antigen and can actually fight the antigen themselves. So that those are effector memory T cells. Also the tissue memory T cells, right? Or tissue resident memory T cells, right? That provide immediate local protection on the site of infection. So we're looking at these different things. So the different memory T cells will also be there. So not only do we have the memory B cell, but we have 3 different types of memory T cells, right? So we have the general function, rapid activation upon re-exposure, enhanced effectiveness of the cytotoxins and antibodies, and we have long-term surveillance over the body, right? So the combined long-term immunity will be there, right? So they have synergy with each other. So the memory B cells and T cells work together to provide comprehensive immunity, right? It provides immunological memory as they will stay in the body for years and increases the effectiveness in case of re-exposure. So you have long-term immunity being established by that, right? And that proves that somehow is the basis for the proving the effectiveness of vaccines. They provide a more rapid and robust response to any type of re-exposure, and they protect against any type of reinfection, right? That's generally the rules of these memory cells, memory B cells and memory T cells, right? So the primary immune response, right? We have what we call the lag phase, the log phase, the plateau phase, and the decline phase. 4 phases, right? So in the first response, we're gonna have the lag phase. So initially, there's a period where no specific antibodies are detected in the blood, right? So that means that nothing is really happening within the lag phase, right? At the point, right? So it takes a little time there. Then the log phase, no. So after the lag phase, antibody levels begin to rise exponentially. So we're looking at the exponential increase of antibodies there, and then it will plateau. So antibody levels peak and stabilize at that plateau, and then they're gonna have a decline. So the antibodies gradually decrease. So that's a general primary immune response. All right. The secondary immune response now, we have a shorter lag phase, much shorter. Since this antigen has been here before, the memory cells recognize it much quicker, right? So there's a shorter lag phase, right? And their log phase is much steeper, right? Much larger. So antibodies rise in their levels quickly and reach much higher levels, right? And they're gonna have a high peak where you have peak concentration of antibodies, right? Which are significantly higher than primary response, and they have a prolonged plateau. So you'll actually come down into a prolonged plateau, and then decline. So let me lengthen this. It'll actually go into a prolonged. Well, that looks weird. We're actually going to a prolonged plateau and then decline. Alright? We'll have that there. That's generally what's happening there. Somebody unmuted? Okay, don't say anymore. That's generally what's happening there, right? So here we see a primary immune response, and then the secondary immune response with the primary underneath it. So we're looking at this. So hopefully we can interpret this well enough, right, to understand how these questions will be answered, right? So that's generally it for immunological mechanisms.